Sitting here in Belgium with Michael Rhodes. Thanks for having us over here.
My pleasure.
You've been around the world a lot of times.
A lot of times.
And anything particular about Belgium you like?
I like it when it stops raining and the sun comes out.
Yeah.
But this year has been a really bad spring and summer, cold and wet everywhere we went, and that's not normal.
Yeah.
You know, usually we get more sunshine.
And do you experience that with the people who come and visit you? Are they a little bit grumpy when they come to you?
I think I'm probably the grumpiest.
Ah.
If it keeps raining. Well, I live in the subtropics, so I'm used to a lot of sunshine.
Where do you live?
I live in Australia on the southeast coast of Queensland, and it's beautiful.
And there a lot of interest in the subject of self-realization over there?
I think self-realization is generally spread fairly well out everywhere. So yes, you find it in Australia. There are pockets, and there's a pocket near where we live. But you find it in every country now. Something is really growing. It's rather like people are taking responsibility for their own spirituality. I saw a cartoon not long ago, and I didn't think it was funny. It said, your spirituality is your relationship with the divine. Religion is crowd control. I couldn't see anything funny because it's so true.
Yeah.
Okay, it's funny.
Yeah. Well, I have a big love for Australia because there once was a radio show about Advaita over there called the Advaita Show. It's no longer on, but it was about 6 years ago. One of my first times I heard about the subject. Is the things you talk about, can it be put under the label Advaita?
I don't like any labels. I think, to me, what I talk about is the natural way of life, and I think 90% of the world live an alternative way of life. So the whole so-called alternative movement, I think, is appropriate, and everybody else who does it a different way, I think they're the alternative. So to me, I'm an appropriate person.
A normal person?
No, God no. No, normal puts you in hospital. You don't ever want to be normal. Normal puts you in hospital. Normal people, they criticize themselves, they get angry, they get aggressive, they stress out, they get tired. No, I'm not normal.
How would you define yourself then?
Well, let's put it this way, and to be honest, I never criticize myself, I never worry, I've forgotten what anxiety feels like, I never get angry. I've been angry once in the last 20 years. I never get tired, and that's the truth. I don't stress. All those negatives, I don't do them, because to me, it's not necessary. I don't have fear, and you're looking at me as if I'm not normal, which is exactly my point.
So Michael, how did that came about? I think you were not born this way. Yeah, you were born this way?
No, I wasn't born this way. How did it come about? That's an interesting question. Like, we've got to go back then, when I was in my early 20s. My father died of cancer, and I could see family problems looming, and so I emigrated to Tasmania, which is the island state of Australia. And I was married. I was only about 26. I was married, and we had 2 children. And while I was there, I continued my career of farming. I'd always worked for my father, but I wanted to be a beef farmer, but economic circumstances forced me to be a dairy farmer. And then I began to notice that the way I farmed didn't really work all that well. But then I modelled myself on the local farmers. And so then, because I wasn't a local, I began to think about things a bit more, and I sort of headed in a different direction. In hindsight, I would say what was happening was, when we're born, our parents tell us, they tend to project us on a path to success, and so we all want to be successful, and particularly the parents want their children to be successful. And so often the soul is on one journey and the personality is on another journey. And when I got to Tasmania, not through me, but the soul and the personality came together on the same journey. And so the soul began to ask questions that the personality never considered. And so I found myself in a very unusual position of questioning things that I'd never really questioned. You've got to remember, I was very right brain dominant, so we look at the world in a different way. I left school at 14, and so I had pretty low self-esteem, thinking I was not educated properly, which in fact I wasn't. And so I slipped through the net of normality quite early. You know, I was a tadpole that got away. And so in Tasmania, things went along, you know, but when I was 34, 35, I came out of the house one morning, and it was about 20 minutes to 5, ready for my milking. And I'd made a roundabout. We had 4 children by now, and I'd made a roundabout, just a small one. I jumped on it, and as I spun around, I thought to myself, so why am I milking cows? Because I really like cows, but I hated milking. And it came to me immediately that fear cracks the whip, and I bend over and milk cows, and I didn't like the answer. So I thought, so how have I ended up in this situation? Here I am in a hill farmer in Tasmania. How did this all unfold? And I wasn't really sure. I sort of thought to myself, I seem to be a victim of circumstances. Why would the circumstances put me this direction? Why would they make things come this way? And so then I thought, so where am I going in life? And I thought, well, I don't know really where I'm going. Where have I come from? And suddenly this question wasn't biological. Where have I come from? I don't really know. And then the big one hit me, and it hit very, very hard. And I'd never even considered it until that moment. So who am I? And I thought, wow, who am I? And that really hit me. And so I went back into my late wife, and I said to her, she said, what are you doing back indoors? I said, I had this question, who am I? And she said, I've been thinking things like that lately. I said, well, you know what, I want to know. I'm Aries, we don't mess around. It took me 15 years to find out, but that 15 years took me away from farming. It took me right around Australia in a caravan with the 4 kids and the wife, and I started a community based on the Findhorn community in Australia. And then in Findhorn community, I started a similar one. And that took me out of that, and gradually I realised this is my journey. And so in that journey, I began the transformation of my life. I didn't follow anybody. I read a lot of books, but there were many key incidents that took place. One of those, for instance, when my oldest son was about 12, I took him to a speed reading course. And I sat outside because as a farmer in Tasmania at that stage, it was a struggle. It was seriously struggling. There were economic reasons. And the guy came out and said, well, why don't you do it? I said, well, quite honestly, I can't afford it. He said, oh, no problem. He said, we'll trade. And my low self-esteem, I said, well, what can I trade you with? He said, can you teach me self-sufficiency? I said, yeah, I can teach you that. And so I went in, and to keep it short, I became the star pupil. In 8 weeks of speed reading, I was so far ahead of the others. And at the very end, when there was a test, you know, all the others were teachers, apart from my son and I looked like I probably weighed 20 kilos more than I weigh now. I looked like I'd just climbed out of the wrestling ring. And they were very affronted that I had beaten them so thoroughly in a final test. So we did another final test because they thought I cheated. I still haven't worked out how you could have cheated, but anyway. So I did a bit better that time, and then they gave up on it. But that did something for me. I thought, my God, these are all teachers, and I've just beaten them completely in this. And so there were a number of incidents like that, but we had to read a book. And speed read a book, and it was called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. and who was one of the first plastic surgeons. So you say to him, my nose is bent, this is ruining my life. And he'd say, no, you're ruining your life, but your bent nose has nothing to do with it. You're blaming that. And so he would happily straighten it, but he would say to him, it's nothing to do with your bent nose. Today they don't have that sort of ethics. But Maxwell Maltz did have. He's one of the earliest ones. And so he talked about all the boxes people are in. And I realised, oh my God, I am in so many boxes. Boxes of beliefs, boxes, my parental boxes, my school boxes, your peer group boxes, my own created boxes, boxes and boxes. So I decided I'm coming out. It took me a long time, but eventually, if there's any more boxes, which there probably is, I can't see them. And so my life was not so much about making money. To be successful, right-brainers couldn't care less. And it's just not my way of thinking. And but I wanted to know who I am, and it took me 15 years, and then I found out. And that 15 years was a downhill journey of sickness and suffering and pain. And people have read my books, and I've got about 15 out there. They sort of know that I've... So my classroom was the hard knocks of life.
Yeah. Some teachers say, without crisis, no awakening. Do you agree?
I went through crisis. I went through a very powerful crisis. In fact, I was about 2 days off death. And instead of the body died, identity died. I mean, I play identity. You know, if I go to the Netherlands and they say, well, who are you? If I tell them, well, I'm a magnificent, metaphysical, multidimensional, immortal being of love and light, they'd probably say, well, we have a little room for people like you. And so I wouldn't get into the country.
Yeah.
So I play the identity game, but it's not really who I am.
No. But that identity can become quite a burden for you.
Not for me, but it's a burden for most people, because every time the body dies, there's the opportunity to let go of identity. But that identity ego holds on, and so when we incarnate again, we immediately establish another identity and go straight back into the same illusion.
Yeah.
You know, I don't live in the illusion. It's like you walk in a dream awake.
Before the interview started, we chatted a little bit about your age. You look like, let's say, 60, 65.
You're very kind.
The same I had with Eckhart Tolle when I met him. How come it looks like the clock stopped?
Yeah, actually in many ways the biological clock stops. And I haven't met Eckhart, but I can absolutely believe, because to me he's absolutely one of the enlightened people. And yeah, well, what happens is, I have unconditional love for myself. Unconditional. Mm-hmm. So I never criticize, never judge myself, never look in the mirror, I'm not good enough. I did 49 years of that, because I went through my spiritual enlightenment at about 49 years of age, 49 and 3 months. And so I never do any of that. And I love my body. I talk to my body. I talk to the cells of my body. And it tells me what I need to know, how to look after it. And only just recently I realized that I need to bring the body in line with my fairly high state of consciousness. And so now I've taken scat out of my diet. Scat is sugar, coffee, alcohol, tobacco. Well, tobacco went out 50 years ago. Alcohol, I've never really been into it. Well, that was easy. Coffee, I liked my coffee.
Yeah. So
I haven't had a coffee in 3.5 months, and I won't drink coffee again. Sugar was the tough one, because I could honestly say I was a chocoholic. You know, I used to eat my way through chocolate, but I haven't had chocolate in 3.5 months, and I won't ever take chocolate again.
What changed?
Well, you really want to know that story? I'll tell you, be honest, at 75 I suddenly realised I had a prostate problem. Not prostate cancer, but prostate problems in men, probably 1 in 500 doesn't get it. And at 75 suddenly I had it. And so for 4 years I took all the, I'm serious when I say there's probably 1,000 cures, except none of them cure it. But they have fun selling them. Yeah. I don't take drugs. I don't do any of those sort of prescription drugs. Mm-hmm. And so I took all herbal remedies and none of them did any good. And so one day I'm having a talk with Max. Max is my body consciousness, the body intelligence. If you get 50 trillion cells together, they all have a certain degree of intelligence. And so your body overall has a body consciousness or a body elemental or a body intelligence. So I call mine Max, which is short for maximum potential. And so Max often we'd have discussions to maximise my physical potential. And so I said to him, you know, you're not being very friendly. I have this prostate problem. He said, well, it's not about us not being friendly. You're not friendly. I said, what do you mean I'm not friendly? He said, well, you put out a projection to live 150 years. And that's a strong intention, and that energy counts. And you have the consciousness to do that, but your body at this stage won't be able to do that. I said, I think I've got a good body. Max said, well, I refer you to have a chat with your prostate. So I thought, okay, this is getting a bit weird even for me. And so I said to the prostate, you're not very friendly. And the prostate said, no, you're the one who's not very friendly. I said, how do you mean? And the prostate said, you keep eating inflammatory foods. So I get inflamed. In a way, I'm your monitor, I'm your barometer. I'm telling you, if I'm swelling, this is not good in your body. And so I said, okay, I see that. So then I checked out, Googled inflammatory foods and found out which ones they are. Sugar's the number one. And so I decided, okay, I won't eat any more of these. In 3.5 months, my prostate is improved by about 85%. And I'm not bothering with the medicines, not that they made any difference anyway. So I'm changing my diet, so then I can feel already the consciousness of the body rising. I feel that in certain ways. But it was interesting in the early stages to hear my brain saying, okay, in between like a break in an intensive, how about we have a piece of chocolate? And my body is saying no, but my brain is saying yes. And so your brain doesn't really know what the body wants because the brain gets addicted. And I've read that it's more difficult to get off sugar than it is cocaine because it hits the same pleasure centre. Having never taken cocaine, I wouldn't have any clue about that. But I haven't really found it a great problem at all. Certainly I use willpower, but now I hardly need to.
That's interesting what you say. So it's not the body that gets addicted to stuff like that, it's the brain?
It's definitely the brain with things like that. The body can get addicted because if you eat junk food, gradually your body gets more and more acid. And that acidity creates and maintains a certain microbiotic culture in your body that wants more acidity. But I've never really had that problem. My problem was really, the biggie was sugar. Coffee, I could deal with that. That was no problem. And so now the body's going through changes, and I'm really, really aware of that. I can feel it happening in me. And so, you know, the sort of youth is the fact that when you live more in the moment, if you're in the moment entirely, you're out of linear time, because linear time's never in the moment. The moment is spherical time. And so as you live more and more in the moment, you never worry, you never stress, you never criticize, you never get angry. They consume your energy and they age the body. Particularly, I mean, they really age the body. And so when you treat the body as your own lover, and you love your body, and you treat it with respect, and you talk to it, and you say to it, how about that cream brulee? And your body quietly says, not a good idea. Then you eat it, and about 3 o'clock next morning you find, yes, that was right, not a good idea.
Yeah. Michael, then there are some teachers from the Advaita world who tell me that I'm not the body.
Of course you're not the body, but that body is a temple of your spirit. You are a soul. Most people look on themselves as a body personality with the soul. And the soul is like a spare handbag. But in fact, you are an immortal soul with a physical body. But that physical body is the vehicle of the soul you are. And that vehicle needs respect. And it's no good saying, okay, one of the paradoxes and the traps of our time is, it's my observation that we are holistic beings. And everyone would agree to that. enlightenment should be a holistic. So you can become spiritually enlightened and still not know what unconditional love is and still not have emotional balance. I could name a few who've been there and are now gone, but I won't do that. It's not necessary. And so for me, when I became spiritually enlightened, for 2 years I sat on what I call the plateau of enlightened complacency. And there was a few others up there, but it was a bit boring. And so I thought to myself, I think I'll come down. And then I came down and realised, okay, well the truth is I've just left kindergarten. Now I'm enlightened, I've left kindergarten. So now I'll go into junior school. So I put myself into junior school. Senior, you don't do senior in this reality at all. You move into another realm. And so I consider today I'm in 5th year junior school. I have no idea whether I'll reach 7th school. I don't try to do anything. I love being me, and that seems to be enough.
So enlightenment is the beginning. It's not an end point.
It's not an end point at all. And the people who make the jokes, this is it, this is the end, have never been enlightened. But then I moved on and I continued on and I came to the point of unconditional love. And unconditional love was more powerful to me than just enlightenment. Unconditional love, I was consumed with love for myself. I realised I loved all humanity. Quite honestly, that's why I do what I do. You see, when you love unconditionally, it's no longer personal. Now, I've got a lovely wife over there, as you can see, and there is, of course, a level of emotion. But everybody, there we go again, everybody thinks that love is an emotion. Love is not an emotion. Never has been and never will be.
What is it then?
Love is the power of creation. And so when you're loving yourself, you're recreating yourself in the image of love. And when you're loving other people, your energy is affecting them. And I watch people who go through the intensives, and particularly nowadays when I've really totally given myself to it fully, I watch people's lives transform. And they write to me and say, my whole life, you've changed my whole life. I write back and say, thank you, but I don't change your life, you do. I show you the way it's possible. I can put a person's, if you're in a dark room, I can put the finger on the switch, but I'm not allowed to push it down. I can't do that. Everybody has to switch the light on for themselves. And so that unconditional love was a monumental thing. And then at that moment, that balanced my emotions. And so I no longer have imbalanced emotions. Most people control their emotions. I teach emotional balance. If you balance your emotions, it works. You see, I'm known as a spiritual teacher, and I finally accept that after 15 years of rejecting it. I finally accept it. But to me, there's 2 ways of life. One way works and the other way doesn't work. And seriously, about 94% live life in a way that doesn't work. About 6% live in a way that works. So in a way that works, you're not interested in success. There's no such thing as success. There's no such thing as failure. They're all just human concepts. And you can be a multi-millionaire in a way that doesn't work, and everybody calls you a success. But, in a way like Trump. Trump is a very, very wealthy person, but he's not everybody's role model of how we should be. And so you begin to see that success, you look at the wealthy and they're dying, miserable, alone, isolated. They have emotional problems, they have physical sicknesses in their bodies. We're designed to be conscious. We're designed to have our chakras open. We're designed to have a healthy body. One of the ways I explain it in an intensive is like this. We live in duality. I no longer live in duality, but most people do. And often the question is, what is duality? And I got this word, this English word, which you'll be very familiar with, individuality. So I twist it, in divided duality. Even my translators can do this now. In divided duality. So the divide is here we have physical and mortal, the body, what we see. And here we have metaphysical and immortal. Metaphysical includes your mental and emotional body. So metaphysical, immortal. Successful people and the way that doesn't work put at least 94% of their energy into the physical immortal, and maybe, and I'm being hugely generous, maybe 6% into the metaphysical and immortal.
Yeah.
I balance them. I live the physical and the metaphysical equally, so I've taken the divide out of the dualities. So I no longer live in the duality.
Here is the term non-duality.
So I live in non-duality.
Yeah. And does this non-duality have any, how do you call it, qualities?
You mean, can I taste it?
Yeah, can you, people say, I can only point to it, but can I experience it? Can I feel it?
Of course people can experience it, otherwise what would I be doing as a teacher? You know,
Yeah.
the whole idea of a teacher, I say to people, you know, what I am, you can become.
Yeah.
I don't, say that I'm anything particularly special, but on the other hand, I'm certainly not normal. And normal, as I say, there's a death sentence today. You don't want to be normal. When your kids say, what's wrong with you, Dad? You're not normal. You say to them, oh, say it again. That's lovely. Say it again. I'm not normal. So, yeah, I mean, it has qualities. It has the quality of well-being in a way that you can't imagine. It has a quality of certainty in a way that nobody would comprehend. It has a quality of clarity, of absolute clarity. A lot of people say, what is my purpose? You have a sense of purpose beyond anything that you could imagine, in as much as there is no purpose at all. The purpose of being is enough. The purpose of love is enough. We have one human energy. You could put all, as you know, in quantum physics, you could put all humanity in this. If you were to take the space out of every atom in every human, then you could put all humanity in the size of a sugar cube. So there's one humanity. The way I live my life, the way Eckhart Tolle lives his, and people of that calibre, of which there are many, the way they live their life affects all humanity. Not that they're going to come up and say thank you, but it affects all humanity.
You said once before that you were reluctant to get out and say, hey, I'm Michael and I have this beautiful thing to share. You didn't give much publicity to your talks.
That's true. For about 15 years, I was a reluctant spiritual teacher.
How come?
Because I didn't have the love.
The love for?
Humanity. Not that I have today. I mean, many people are what I call good people. I wasn't interested in being good or bad. I just wanted to be me. And to be me, truthfully to be me in that time, I would have stayed at home on my bit of land, and I would have grown fruit trees. I would have sold where I was. I would have had 5 acres. I'd have fruit trees. I'd be completely self-sufficient. And I'd say, it's fine, the world can get on with it. But one time something happened. A little being said to me, if there were no flowers, if there were no bees pollinating the flowers, what would happen? I said, well, there would be no flowers. And this being said, would that be perfect? I said, yes, it would be perfect, but I got the point. The point is, I like flowers. And so it's more perfect to have bees. And so the message to me was, then go and pollinate the human flowers with truth and with love. I could pollinate them with truth, but I hadn't got the love aspect. And then when I had this extraordinary experience of unconditional love, and something I did in one moment that was an act of complete unconditional love, then I realized I will stay with this forever. And in that moment it transformed me again, and I became the person I am today. In a way, I'm glad the earlier years I wasn't known, because I was a very, very different person. And when a leopard has spots, you can't change them. And so the world didn't get to know me as a leopard with spots. They know me the person I am today. The person I am today is the one who's becoming much more known. Yeah. And that's good. So everything works perfectly if you can see the perfection. And so I've been in no hurry. I'm going to live a long time. And I think when I'm, well over 100, people come, I've got to go and listen to this guy. He's way over 100 and they reckon he looks like a 70-year-old. I've got to see this for myself. Maybe I'm dreaming, but I suspect not.
And you still talk about yourself as a person. In some Advaita circles, that is, there's no such thing as a person.
I've never studied any of that.
No.
So if you were to talk about that to me, I don't know. I'm a simple guy who looks at life in a simple way. To me, the greatest truths are the simplest. I'm a magnificent, metaphysical, multidimensional, immortal being of love and light, but so are you. We call that a person. That will do me.
Yeah, but is the person talking about dividing? Then there are more persons. Then you are a person, I'm a person, there are persons.
There's one person.
One person.
Yeah, and then there's only, in the end, there's not one person, there's one universe. And the person is the universe. But you've got to get past personality to realise that you're not just a person.
Yeah.
It's back to individuality, back to divided duality, back to the one in the all. Yeah. Many feel that, but not so many feel the all in the one. And then fewer feel the all in the all.
So am I talking to myself right now?
I'll let you decide that. But yes, in a way you are. In a way, everybody you talk to, it's one of the things I say to everybody you meet, everybody who's unpleasant to you, you're looking at the part that treats you unpleasantly. And when you treat yourself with reverence and love and deep respect, you'll find that people around you, the people that come into your orbit of life, have that same attitude and same energy. Very much works that way. But you see, on the other hand, I can't put into an interview what I put into my intentions, so I won't try to get too deep in this.
My pleasure. Could we call each other mirrors? Do you reflect to me what I'm carrying?
The mirror analogy is a good one, but it goes beyond the mirror. The simple fact is there is only one humanity. The simple fact is there is nothing outside self. The self you are, there is nothing outside of you. When you look out there, what you see is an illusion created by mass mind and held by subconsciousness. We have a choice. Now the mass lives subconsciously. Bruce Lipton, the famous biologist, said that 94% of humanity lives subconsciously. I would like to chat with Bruce one day because he's right as regards to that. But we're not designed to live subconsciously. Everything in nature lives consciously. Everything. And so we are a conscious design. But long, long ago, we slipped slowly into the morass of the subconscious. The subconscious doesn't come up with newness. It comes up with cleverness. And so we've become more intellectual and more clever. But our clever allows us to pollute all the rivers. 100 years ago, you could drink from most rivers and you'd be safe. Maybe not the Thames and some of the city rivers, but in the country today, you couldn't do that. They tell me in 2050, the oceans will be pretty much dead, and clever allows for all that. Clever allows for technology that we've created, that if a meteorite went by and wiped out the silicon chip, we would be in big trouble. Or if, shall we say, the poles and North and South Pole reverse polarity, we have no electricity. The Kalahari Bushman would say, did something happen? But the rest of humanity would be running around screaming and dying by the millions because we put ourselves out on a technological limb. What you have pointing at me, do you know how it works? Could you recreate it? Could you make that? Because I couldn't. I mean, I wouldn't even know how my car works anymore. It's a computer on 4 wheels. Once upon a time, I actually knew how it worked. Yeah. Now it's left me completely behind. And so we've created a technology that only very few of us have a clue how it works. And in other words, we've put our reliance outside of ourselves. We've created reliance outside of ourselves. In the Paleolithic times, we were self-reliant. And in the Paleolithic times, our pineal was as big as a small bird's egg, as small as the last joint of your little finger. Today, with the loss of self-reliance, and we even gave our spirituality away to religion. So we did that second-hand. Today, overall, our pineal, and there are many different, who don't have this, the pineal has shrunk to the size of a grain of rice. And as it gets smaller, they're now finding in dementia cases, when they die, the pineal is atrophied. There's no energy in it. And we have a new case of dementia now every 7 seconds. Every 7 seconds in the Western world there's a new case of dementia. In the third world countries, nobody's counting. It's very much in the Western world. A new dementia every 7 seconds. We have a new diagnosis of cancer every 1 minute. We have a death from cancer every 3.5 minutes. Medical science tells us it will get twice as bad in the next 20 years. This is all down to clever and
who's
intellect. Nobody's to blame. Nobody's to blame.
Nobody's to blame someone.
Nobody, exactly. You see, there's another game we play, blame. The simple, I'll tell you a truth, and if you keep it in your life, it'll steer you in a good way. In every moment of your life, you are creating the content and the direction of every moment of your life. And it never ends. Absolutely never ends. 40,000 plus sicknesses and diseases we have. Where did they come from? Out of the human consciousness. They're the manifestations of about 40 plus thousand different types of discord, worry, anxiety, rage, anger, and on and on and on. Rabbits are not very creative. They come up with about 20.
Yeah. So that mechanism of blaming, I've always said, well, that's the capitalistic society which makes me miserable, because it tells me I have to have this watch, that kind of shoes, that car.
But you see, you only play the game. You go along with it. Like if you want to buy a pair of trousers now, you've got to basically buy the fashionable trousers, because that's the ones they sell. So that, I just go along with that. There's nothing you can do about that.
But it doesn't make you complete.
It doesn't make any difference to me.
No, it doesn't add anything to your sense of self. No,
absolutely not. My sense of self is, I honestly feel I am the universe. I can sit down and, if I choose to, listen to the galaxy. I can listen to the universe. And I don't do that a lot, but it doesn't communicate. Hi, Michael, how are you today? It doesn't communicate like that. There is an energy coming that is of vastness and eternity, and you can get lost in that. We finished an intensive in England, and I'd been taking people through a guided exercise, and at the end I'd gone in very deeply because of no translation, and I'd gone in very deeply, and I found myself not as Michael but as a being approaching eternity. As suddenly I was beyond the universe, beyond this universe. The Pleiadians consider there are about 490 billion universes. So ours is just one of them. And I was somewhere else completely, and the experience was so vast, my emotional body overloaded. I couldn't emotionally handle it. And I considered I'm pretty balanced, but that was way overload. And I began to cry. And I left the room, because we only had 10 minutes to the end, and I left the room and I walked upstairs and I walked into her, and I was crying deeply because the emotional overload of connecting with something not more vast than I am, but a glimpse of the vastness that I am, that you are, that he is, that Carolyn is, the vastness of what we actually are. And I realised, wow, I might need to move up into grade 6 before I can handle that. But it was wonderful, and occasionally outdoors I will sit and touch on the periphery of that. This time I went a bit beyond the periphery. So the universe, when it communicates with you, doesn't do it telepathically or with anything. It's an allness. We don't have a language that describes that.
Never any time that you thought, maybe this time or in past times, that you lost it? Did you think, well, this is too much, I'm going insane?
No, I look at the world and I'm afraid the world's going insane. No, I know what you're saying. There were times way back in my earlier development when I felt that I was going insane. And I realized that that was based in, I was resisting. I was resisting a greater reality. I wanted to be in the reality where I could be normal. I was sitting down by the river, 40 people around me, and I was listening to trees talking to me. The river was talking to me. And I'm listening, and I looked around me, and I thought, I must be the loneliest person on the planet right now, because nobody else can hear this. And that sort of thing continued, and I began to feel very much, if this continues, I'm going to lose it. And then I realized, it came to me all you have to do is accept this. Nothing else. This is all down to your resistance. And I moved to a point of acceptance. I was sitting under a tree once, and I had my eyes shut. It was like there was an enormous bottle appeared in front of me, like a champagne bottle. No champagne in it. And of course, I reached up and took hold of it, and I pulled the cork out. And out of the cork came this, like a smoky light body, human body, came out of the bottle, and it hovered in front of me and then moved into me. And in that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I'd released my metaphysical potential, which as a practical farmer, I had kept under control, subdued, locked away. It's like once I let the genie out the bottle, and very quickly after that I surrendered to life the way it presented itself to me. And gradually I let go. Everybody has around them borders and boundaries that are emotional and mental. When people take drugs, they go beyond those. When they take psychedelic drugs, they go beyond their own borders and boundaries. But the problem is when they come back, they're a little bit further away than when they began. So I never did any of the drugs. But gradually, I pushed my emotional and mental borders further and further away under the stimulus of my particular teacher. And until today, obviously there is a border, because when I touched eternity for that moment, my emotion came up. So I obviously reached the boundary of my emotion, but I couldn't see the boundary, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah. You talk about left brain and right brain. What's the main difference?
The difference is incredible. I mean, it's huge. There are many books on this now, but I had once upon a time, I had no idea. I was born right brain dominant. I went to a school, and most schools today are left brain dominant. They say that everybody who writes left-handed is right brain. That's not true. About 60% of them are right brain dominant. In our class there was one. Now I don't know whether he was right brain dominant. So right brain dominant, I'm married to a right brain dominant woman. We see life through rose-coloured glasses. We see life as beautiful. We see life as perfect. Neither of us worry about anything. We don't do anxiety. And so the difference is the left brain is about survival, very much, and competition and fear. Fear comes from the left brain. Right brain has no relationship with fear at all. And right brain is not about, there's no competition in right brain people. There's no fear, and there's no need to survive. You know, I'm an immortal being. What do I survive? I mean, I've lived forever. I will live forever. What do I have to survive? And I actually teach people, you know, if you're in a situation where you're running with the crowd for the survival of the body, you're running back into another repeat cycle. But if you could, let's say there was a tsunami coming, if you could walk toward the tsunami and say, I choose love, likely you're to lose your body, but you're not the body. You're an immortal being. And when you walk in toward it and choose love, and you're terrified, but you still walk toward it using courage, well, when the tsunami has passed, you're in a fifth-dimensional reality. You've now transcended the three-dimensional, but this is not just a three-dimensional reality, this is 3 and 4-dimensional. The only thing three-dimensional about you is your physical body. Everything that's asking me questions comes from your fourth-dimensional aspect. And you're pretty good at it too.
Oh, thank you. But it's not to be seen.
Oh no, you can't see it. All we can see is through our eyes. is everything that has a frequency slower than the speed of light. And if it has a frequency slower, then we see it. If it's a frequency beyond that, we don't see it. There's more life on this planet with a frequency beyond the speed of light than there is slower than the speed of light. But nobody sees it, so it isn't there.
And could we call that fourth dimension what the normal people call intuition? That voice?
Intuition touches into it, and intuition is part of it, yes. Intuition, show me your intuition, you can't.
Oh.
And so intuition works on that fourth dimensional level, yes, absolutely.
And you are tapped into that 24 hours a day?
Pretty much all the time, yeah. But I also live on a physical level as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I brought them into balance, and I do the best I can to teach this, and I'm getting pretty good at it.
Yeah. And you also wrote several books about it?
I've written quite a lot of books about my metaphysical travels. Yeah.
And those books are they for everybody or only for brave people?
To be honest, no, I don't think they're for everybody. They're not for the left-brain skeptic. They would simply say, okay, what drug was he on? But they're definitely for everybody who has an open mind and who's inquiring. So what is life about? And they are increasing in numbers every day. Every day there's more stepping away from the this is how it is to actually how is it? Because religion, we created religion, so you can't look at religion and blame it. Even the Illuminati, you can't blame them because we created them. If overall humanity did not have a victim consciousness, then there would be no victimizer. I don't have a victim consciousness, so I don't get victimized. Sure, they can determine how much I pay for my diesel fuel and food and things like that, but as for how I grow as a being, if they put me in prison, there'd be nothing they could do about it. Like Nelson Mandela. He went into prison a very angry man, and with rights, you could say it was righteous anger. But the man who came out was a very, very different man, not a broken man, a made man. A man who now saw humanity in a different way, who saw reconciliation. Probably, I don't know, but quite likely, certainly enlightened to a fairly high level of enlightenment. And he looked for reconciliation. His heart was in love. He'd found something. And so prison gave it to him. It couldn't take it away. And I know a man who's waiting on death row. And he has found love. A tough way to find it.
Yeah. Some final questions. For example, the free will. That's something I love to talk about. People around me love to talk about. Did I come out of free will here to Belgium to talk to you? Or was it meant to be? Was it? Did it never happen? Was it just circumstances? Any view on that?
I would say don't get too dogmatic on one way of this, because all have their own truth. How can you have free will if you're in a box? If you've got a belief, how free is your will? It's only as strong as you... I'll give you an example. Many years ago in Australia, in Brisbane, I gave a talk, and I had to learn this. And somebody came up to me and said, wow, I'm so glad you're still a Christian. And I said, really? I said, I actually didn't know I was. I said, I really didn't... Oh, I left it, but I didn't know I was a Christian. Oh, but you were so Christian in your talk. So they heard me through the Christian box. Another one came up to me and said, wow, you're into Krishnamurti, are you? I said, no, I have an enormous respect for Krishnamurti, but I've never met him. I've read a couple of his books. I've never listened to him. And I said, but I'm not, I'm not into Krishnamurti, but he heard me through his Krishnamurti box. Another one came up, oh, you're into NLP. I hadn't a clue what they're talking about. I thought it was a new political party. And it turns out to be neuro-linguistic programming. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't know what that is. Yeah. And he said, well, that's what you were talking about. I said, well, there you go. Yeah. And then another one came out, I can't remember, that was something else. So there were 4 of them, all heard me through their box. And then I realised I did the same thing. And so I thought, okay, thank you, great lesson, I've learned. And so today, it's a very interesting question what you ask. Do we live in our boxes of our beliefs most people, only when you get all out of them, and you don't need a belief, and you don't need, when you stand outside of them, do you have a certain degree of freedom to choose. But when I left all my boxes, I'd already chosen to be who I am today. The choice was already made. 15 years of kicking my heels reluctance. My late wife died. I went through the experience of unconditional love, and I looked at it and I laughed and laughed. I thought, well, there we go. Now I don't have a choice. Now I have my choice. Now I can choose, finally can choose. I don't have a choice. But the choice of not choosing was the choice I would choose. But most of humanity, let's say right now, we're at interesting times. At the end of 2012, the frequency shifted. I could explain that, but it doesn't matter. The frequency changed and it lifted. And it lifts, this is probably we're almost at the end of about the 5th cycle of humanity. Each cycle is around about 200,000 years. And every time there's a frequency shift toward the end of it, which means everybody's going to decide, do I recycle again and do another 200,000 of these types of incarnations, or do I move on? So we all have the choice. Now, those who are open and are moving toward love and moving toward compassion and care for humanity, they're moving in one direction. Those who want to survive, who are fear-dominated, are moving in another direction. But most of the people don't know anything's happening or will not make a choice. That is the choice of self-denial. So even if we're not choosing, we're choosing. And even if we don't have a belief, we have a belief that we don't have a belief.
Yeah. Where can people come and visit you in let's say the next 6 months? You don't have the agenda, it's on your website.
Next 6 months, I would say go to the website, michaelrose.com. And, but visit me, I'm going to America now and I'm doing an intensive there. And then I go home and do one in Australia within a couple of weeks. We go to Japan in November, and then I'm finished. So the next 6 months, I have my 80th birthday next year in April, and then after that we leave and we'll be doing a pretty intensive tour through Europe.
And no end in sight for you?
Well, it depends. I have no end in sight, absolutely. I've done 25 years. Another 25 years' time I'll sort of look at it and say, okay, what's the world doing now? I think the world will be a very different place then. We don't have forever anymore. You know, the world is, I don't mean it's the end, but it's, this cycle is coming to a close, and we're going to go through some interesting times between over the next 20 to 30 years. Every human being is being polarized. Whether they know it or not, every human being will be polarized. They're going to move in one direction or another. There'll be nobody sitting on the fences. They'll be moving toward doubt, aggression, anger, survival, or they'll be moving toward openness, care, love, compassion, and newness. And survival will not be the number one on the agenda. Their love is transcending it. And everybody's going to be polarized, including you, my dear friend.
And I don't have a choice in that.
You don't have a choice.
No.
That says it beautifully.
Yeah.
You do not have a choice.
So
You chose, and is it meant to be? Nothing is meant to be. Nothing is not meant to be. All those things are just, we have a language for the illusion. We don't have a language for truth.
Yeah, that's beautifully said.
And so you have to play around with the illusion to give it a little twist, to try to be able to present a truth in it.
Yeah. Michael, final moments, is there anything you want to touch upon we didn't touch?
No, do you know what I would say? If you were asking me to give a final message, I was saying every situation in your life, choose love. Every time you're confronted, choose love, walk away. Every time there's an argument on the go, you don't need to win. It doesn't make the slightest bit of difference. Choose love, walk away. Choose love. Instead of getting angry with yourself, choose love. Instead of criticizing yourself, choose love. Choose love. It works.
Thanks for this great talk.
My pleasure.